Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Building a Permaculture Property Podcast. My name is Takota Coen, and on today's episode, I've got my buddy Tim Peel-Wickstrom, who is an incredible blacksmith and artisan who's living in Creston, BC. I met Tim. When was it? I think it would have been 5 or 6 years ago at it was like a CD Sunday event in Calgary. Was it the first time we met?
I think the first time we met was actually at it was a farmer gathering in Lethbridge. It was Moira and Jody. They had a farm out there, and they invited you down to speak to them about what you did on your farm.
Oh yeah.
And I had a little forge set up there, doing some demonstrations and showing that to people.
Yeah.
And that was the first time we met. That was I think like 6, 7, or 8 years ago. Like, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. And then ever since then, I just can't stop bumping into you. I just every farmer's market I went to and CD Sunday event and stuff, you're always there. So anyways, that was I remember that now. That was years ago. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like at that time, I've always been when I was a little kid. There's pictures of me. I collected knives and I just like tools, like when my parents would get me like little play tool sets for kids, like at Christmas or my birthday or something, like the plastic cheap ones, and I just would have nothing to do with it. I'd throw them away and I'd go and steal my dad's tools because I wanted the real hammers and the real screwdrivers. So I've always been a tool nut. And when I was a little kid, I would collect these knives, and I, like a lot of little pocket knives, have like a little keychain hook. And I was such a weirdo. I'd like loop them all together, and I had this like tail of knives of like 20 different knives that I'd hooked together in this big
That's
mass.
awesome.
And I'd clip it onto one of my belt loops, and I'd walk around with it as like a 4 or 5-year-old kid. So anyways, when I met Tim, who was you were also a tool nut, we just hit it off super well. And since then we've kept in touch, and I've used a lot of the tools that you've made, and for a while there I was selling them on my website until things got so busy I just can't do it anymore. But anyways, we've been trying to do a podcast for a long time, and I'm super happy to have you on, and I've got some great questions to see the conversation. But before we dive into that, why don't you just give folks a bit of your introduction, background, what got you into blacksmithing and stuff like that?
For sure. So my background, basically, I went to university to study computer science, and I did that for almost 10 years as a career. And then I started basically rethinking my entire life, came across the concepts of permaculture, that kind of stuff. Left my job, did a 2-week intensive course at Verge Permaculture with Rob Avis. And Rob's kind of been a contact between you and me all these years too. And that 2-week course, it really kind of clarified things for me in the direction I wanted to take. And during the process of that course, I met my wife, Lorinda, who's my business partner now, and she works with me in the forge. And it also helped clarify for me pursuing blacksmithing as a career. Some of the things that we talked about in permaculture, like the techniques of waste recycling and looking at ways to basically just make our lifestyles a bit more sustainable. Seeing that, knowing that blacksmiths traditionally used a lot of scrap, like they do make a lot of things out of scrap material because iron and steel are almost infinitely recyclable.
Yeah.
And I had also had an interest in blacksmithing and armor, I guess, what do you call armor smithing too, before then. So I'm kind of a huge nerd, but
you're big into Dungeons and Dragons, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool.
Been playing for too long, but so I saw this opportunity to like combine my interest in permaculture with the blacksmithing and getting like my hands on making tools and making hand tools, and really encouraging people to kind of revisit the value of having tools that are going to last a long time, high quality, that kind of stuff. And it's just, those are things that I'm really interested in as well. So it really helped fuel the fire that's needed to run a business, because there's so much that goes on beyond just hammering metal, right?
Yeah. I had no idea that you started out as a computer science guy.
Yeah.
I just assumed you were like a dwarf that just like crawled out of the ground with a hammer and an anvil in your pocket and just
maybe deep in my heart.
Okay.
But yeah, the interest in Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, that kind of, it spilled over into my real life, and I started making actual armor, like finding wire, learned how to make chainmail, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I was starting to get into actually making plate and stuff, and that requires the forging and whatnot. And then I met a blacksmith just outside Winnipeg, where I lived at the time, and yeah, I got to try heating up some steel and banging out some hooks and things, and I was hooked on the process.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, I was big into it, and I've always wanted to own a forge. I've never been able to find like a decent one that wasn't burned out, but
yeah,
one day when I'm an old man, I'll that's going to be one of my hobbies.
Nice.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really interesting. Like especially now, like since like I said, I didn't realize that you started out as in the tech space. Why the shift? Like that is a dramatic shift to go from, like kind of cutting edge technology back to, many centuries, like because from what I understand right now, like you're still doing everything by hand. Like you're not even using a trip hammer or anything. It's all I mean, I guess I've seen your shop. You do have some power tools, but for the most part, you try to do as much by hand as you can, right? So I'm just curious, like why the drastic shift?
Why the shift?
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why didn't you just get into CNCs and get a plasma cutter? Why did you go all the way back to forge and hammer?
Yeah, a lot of my family and friends wonder that too. It's like, what the hell happened to you? Man, that was such a strange process. It was like the best word I can think of it is a sort of self-initiation, basically exposing myself to new ideas that I'd not explored before, things like the limits to growth, and basically just taking a look at where our society was headed and what I figured reasonable outcomes for the future would be. And I decided for myself at that time that continuing on in tech space and doing programming and working for the government just didn't really have much of a future for me. And when I look at the situation that we're at now, there are so many times I look at where I am and where I've been able to build my life with Lorinda, and I'm like, holy crap. Like I count my blessings, and I wonder if I just lucked out super, super good on that, because it's really the way that I can't explain it. It's just, I'm grateful for where I am. Yeah. But what happened is just exposing myself to new ideas and wanting to make my own life more sustainable, low energy, and what's a word? Maybe it was really like a deep down, just a desire to go back to things that were a bit simpler. Because I've been finding that over time with the focus on the blacksmithing and stuff, is that I really enjoy the simplicity of it, the work of it. With the programming and stuff, there was writing thousands of lines of code to get these outcomes to happen on a computer. And there's an end product to that labor, but it's all digital and you can't really, it's not tangible. And I found with the blacksmithing and working with my hands that there's a real satisfaction there to creating stuff by hand, and then having a physical product at the end of it that I know is going to last a long time. Yeah. And again, I think what I was really trying to do is kind of hedge my bets. And we'll get into this later too, when we get into the topic of Desensus, but it's basically like I figured that our future is going to be a lower energy future. And I honestly, I wanted to prepare for that in my own way. So the blacksmithing by hand, minimal reliance on machines, and trying to get back to basics as much as possible while still being productive to the extent that people are willing to support that business. So,
Yeah.
So
I'm asking another question here, and this is not a facetious question. And I've got some ideas too, but like, why not go back to like the Stone Age in terms of like flints and, like leather? Like why metalworking? Was there some, you're talking about hedging your bets and kind of low energy future. What was the rationale or the thought process behind stopping, somewhere?
Where it did.
Yeah, because when I guess, forgive my ignorance of history, when was the Iron Age? That would have been what, like 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, or something like that.
I'm not clear. I can't say with certainty.
Forgive my crudeness, but I'm pretty sure Jesus was stabbed with an iron spear. So that's why that's why I'm pretty firm on the 2,000 years ago.
Well, Iron Age definitely was around in the time of the Romans, like bronze switching to iron.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm not sure that I consciously thought about that, about why not go all the way back to the Stone Age. Maybe because I wanted it to actually be like possible to run as a modern business. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I could do flint napping and forging with stone. Like, and just be able to make a living at it.
That's fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
It was, well, because I'd had experience with the blacksmithing and it really appealed to me. And again, going to that permaculture class and seeing how these two could be interwoven, I think was a big factor in that. In terms of machinery, I have been debating picking up a small power hammer, like a 25-pound, to help improve efficiency with work. And also because I'm getting older and I'm starting to feel it in my arm.
Yeah.
That's a common, so the body can't last forever, and it will fail if it's abused. So
yeah,
the power is here, electricity is here, why not make use of it while it's around, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's elements too of what I do that date back to like pre-modern times. Like we're talking maybe 15th, 16th century Japan with like charcoal making, using a charcoal forge with the box bellows, doing the knife making and stuff like that by hand, like with stones and files, with no power tools. And that for me more is like more out of a personal interest, trying to explore that and getting a feel for what those techniques are like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good question. Like, and the other thing too is I try to avoid modern welding as much as possible too. Like I want to learn to do forge welding, like weld it in the fire, do it like the Smiths did it back in the, what would you say, like late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, interesting. And so like from a business perspective, is like what like I know you've been running a business for several years now. Like what percentage of your income is coming from blacksmithing like this now?
So we're basically like 100% of our income comes from the smithing business now. And it does surprise quite a few people to hear that, because like, how is that possible? And something that I've read a lot of books by other blacksmiths who've written on the subject about what the heck does it take to get going in a business with blacksmithing. And most people half jokingly say like, prepare to starve, because you're not going to make a lot of money.
No. And
that's true. We don't make a ton of cash, but we make enough to get by. And we design our lifestyle in such a way that we make that possible. Yeah. Like Lorinda's dad, my father-in-law, he lives with us. He helps homeschool Hazel, and he helps pay cover the costs and pay the mortgage and stuff. So with going a non-traditional route, we're able to afford something that maybe we wouldn't be able to if we had like
Yeah.
gone like what's considered typical in this day and age, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. And that was a big strategy for me, was, working with my folks for as long as I could, just to get ahead. It makes a huge difference. I mean, like, so, and this is where like the concept of hedging is like, because I was, born and raised on a farm, and, I have rough experience, doing metal work and, welding and carpentry, just general stuff. I've like, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But I can definitely see, like, when I look out at, some of my friends or colleagues who, don't have those kind of, I guess you can call them like survival skills, or like, like worst case scenario, shit hits the fan skills. I can definitely see how I would want to invest heavily in that hedge. But it's funny because for you, like, you started out as a tech programmer, and then went into blacksmithing, and like I started out as like the opposite. I started out as a farmer, and now I'm moving into the tech space with the cryptocurrency stuff that we're doing. And but I don't think, and it took me a long time to kind of get my head around to the tech space, and I don't think I would have been as interested in it if I didn't feel like I had a grasp on kind of all the other basics leading up to that point for myself, just because I also have some concerns about, the state of the world and where things are heading. And so, it's interesting that, I mean, I guess for yourself, like, you're talking about moving to more, advanced technological stuff in terms of, like, the trip hammers and stuff like that. Is that solely out of a need because you're getting older and your body's wearing out, or is it also just like in your mind, is it just like, what, worst case scenario, I know how to do it the hard way, and so I've got that down pat, and so I'm not opposed to using technology? Is that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It kind of was, I don't know if it was sort of a self-imposed limitation, like basically acquiring the skills so that I could do this without any power. Like, basically, all I need is access to wood and an anvil and a hammer, and I can make things. I can start to make things, right?
Yeah.
But then if we complement that knowledge with power tools like a power hammer and other tools that speed up the job, then I'm not opposed to doing that out of principle.
Yeah.
Lorinda, though, like my wife, who's been helping me out, I've been training her to do blacksmithing as well, with no background whatsoever, and she takes on the role of the striker as well. So in terms of hammering more efficiently or saving my arm, that kind of thing, there's other options available other than using machinery. But in terms of like trying to work on our homestead and getting that established, I want Lorinda to be able to focus on the things that she wants to do, like raising goats and learning to drive her horse and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that she's not in the garage with me swinging a sledgehammer for 6 or 7 hours a day,
Yeah. So what you're saying is you need Hazel to grow up faster.
Yeah.
Totally.
She's almost getting to that age now where she can help, but
yeah.
Well,
it's funny, when you think about like the blacksmith's apprentice, it was always like a 14, 15-year-old kid or whatever, right? That was they probably would have been the striker. That would have been the substitute for the power hammer.
That would have been the start for sure.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's been my approach too, and like with everything that I've tried to do on my farm is I try to design things so that they would function without modern day technology, but they benefit from them.
Exactly.
And so like versus a lot of almost everything we have today, like if there's a solar flare, if there's, shortages of, like we're working on a project in BC, and like there's all, like you can't get, electrical receptacles or breakers or, microchips or things like that. Like, and it's like shutting everything down. And, and so, I mean, just like from a personal, security standpoint, and wanting to have, an insurance in that regard, I have been also consciously designing my life, like I said, so that, I can basically provide my food, water, shelter, and energy with nothing more than, hand tools, which I can either make myself or I already have and would last several lifetimes. It's like if you've got that nailed down, then by all means, like then branch into the into the more technological spaces. But I'm just from it's hard to compare myself to other people, but that's been a conscious process in my life. Like, I've tried, it's like once you grow a garden only with hand tools, and you can do it. Like, yeah, I don't mind using a rototiller. Because I know that I can, worst case scenario, I know how to save my own seeds, and I know how to, do stuff like that. And so, yeah, it's an interesting kind of strategy, but it's also one that not everybody can get involved in. And so I think there's definitely, like, I'm not saying this is the strategy everybody should follow. But I think it's an important strategy for, like, if you feel a calling to do this, there is a tremendous value. And I mean, I'm just seeing, like, now that things are, the stability of our food, energy, water, and shelter systems are starting to show their wear. And I'm just amazed at the number of people who are reaching out now, wanting to get the basic level of, like, can I feed myself? Can I provide my own housing and like water and basic energy needs, just in case. And so, yeah, I think there's a great demand for that. And I mean, and as long as you love it, and you're enjoying it, like it's definitely it's not for everybody, but it's a lifestyle choice. But you can play it anywhere. Like I know people who literally live without power and do everything with horses and stuff. And it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of that yourself.
We're trying to.
Yeah, and that's one end of the spectrum. And it's great that some people are kind of hedging that. Like, I think about the value that those people would have in a kind of disturbance type scenario. Having enough of those people kind of seated around the world would be incredibly valuable for the rest of us to be able to lean on those folks who have that skill set. And I certainly don't have it, as deep or as back as, or at least not in all the spaces that you do. But there's something. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're in the same place. I don't want shit to hit the fan. I like being able to talk to somebody, thousands of miles away via a computer screen. But I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket.
That's right. I think the other thing too, with the personally experiencing, like in your case and mine, doing these things without the need for power, learning and understanding how that feels, and getting like a really like a deep down feeling that I'm okay, like I'll be okay without these things. And I think a lot of people feel a sense of panic right now because they may never have been exposed to those situations, right? So it definitely instills a certain kind of mindset in people. And this is something people could do is take up a hobby or an old world skill, like something that doesn't rely on power, and just for the sake of experimentation and confidence, is like, hey, you know what? I can do something that doesn't require modern technology, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, like even something like baking bread or brewing beer, like that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. And so like, and that's exactly what, when people, I've been doing a lot of, online consulting now with folks who are basically people from the city, realizing that that's the last place you want to be with the way things are going. And so they're, trying to, get out before, while the going's good, kind of a thing. And that's what I tell people to start with, is don't start with like trying to learn how to grow your own food and raise your own animals. Like start with like the present, buy food, find local farmers, get your vegetables, get your meat from them, and start with like the basic preparation, the smoking, the curing, the fermenting, like those, and whether it's, grains or vegetables or meats or cheese, like that's kind of, that's a skill set that's much easier to get into than all other infrastructure of, growing a garden or raising livestock or, trying to grow grain or anything like that. But there's already lots of people who are doing that pretty well, but there's very few people that know how to preserve it without electricity. And like, I'm not lying. Like I have enough salt to last me and my family for decades. And that's all I need.
Nice.
We have root cellars and fermentation. And for fermentation, all I need is salt. And with that, I can basically, make my cheeses and my meats and my fermented vegetables, like, sauerkraut or, kimchi or fermented pickles or whatever it is. And that's it. Like I've got my, glass jars and that's my hedge. But the thing is, it's something that I want to do anyways, whether I was concerned, because the tastes so amazing and it's so much fun. And this is kind of one of the things that we want to talk about, is like, what are like, and so I've got my own reason, but like you just mentioned this idea of like start a hobby. Like most people, are looking for hobbies or something like that. And so I like your idea of, having like a functional hobby, whether that's, hunting or basket making or, sewing or felting or, curing meats, making cheese, all these different, blacksmithing or gardening. Like those are all hobbies that a lot of people do just for fun, but like there's a lot of recreational value in it, but it's also an incredible hedge to have that makes you valuable for the rest of your community. I guess like, are there any other aspects that you can think of for reasons why we'd want to, go into the past to learn some of these skills and continue practicing some of these skills in today's day and age beyond recreation?
There was when you were talking about people who were contacting you looking like, I need advice, help me. And it's almost that panicked feeling, I need to get from here to point A to point Z, like right now. But it's like, no, just take one step and see how that goes first.
Yeah, it's you should have started 20 years ago.
Exactly.
But there's still stuff you can do, but like,
exactly.
If you're not careful, you will bite off more than you can chew, and you'll do more harm than good.
Or just be completely overwhelmed by it too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But when I started out, like that transition from tech to smithing, it was motivated out of fear. I was scared. I was that city guy is like, oh my God, I need to get my life in order. And so the motivation at first was fear, but then I got involved with the sustainable cooperative in Winnipeg that had gardens, and I started learning how to garden with these people who had been gardening for years and years. And like that was the start. And the blacksmithing, for example, as a hobby, was just something I did in my free time. And what I found over time is that the motivation moved from fear to like pleasure, actually enjoying these things. And I'm not saying that everyone is going to enjoy like old school skills like sewing or whatever, or blacksmithing, but there's got to be something out there that somebody would like to do that's based on a skill that basically is, you could say, like pre-electricity. Because when electricity became really common, I feel that was like such a massive pivotal shift, I think, for the world.
Yeah.
Well, for the world that has access to cheap and easy electricity. But yeah, I can't remember, what were you asking?
Well, I was just like what other like, if somebody's coming to you like yeah, this is like, why would I want to get interested in this? Like what sell me on taking up a skill that my great grandparents had. Why would I want to do that?
Well, beyond actually finding it interesting and wanting to pursue it just because it's something that's pleasurable and enjoyable, like one of the main values that come from the past is like thriftiness, like being able to maximize everything you can get out of a resource that you have. And whether that's mending clothes or repairing tools and like all that kind of stuff, that mentality will help us a lot, I feel, in dealing with if there's any crises in the future, because we'll have those skills, or we'll know somebody that has those skills to help us out.
Yeah,
that's one big thing. And I don't know, it's just, the other thing too, I'd say, is that investing in yourself in a skill like that can be, it's like a hedge. Well, it has value. It's investing in yourself. It's a form of capital, right? Like you'd said. And if enough people have these skills and are available, and let others know that they have these skills, and I think it will go a long way towards building confidence, and also knowing that you'll have something of value to offer people in the future if things should go bad. Yeah.
I mean, and like, I'm just thinking, as a kid, like, I played sports and I was in all the like my junior high and high school sports teams and things like that. And, but like, honestly, like when I think back about my childhood, the things that I'm most grateful that my parents encouraged me and in some cases forced me to do. One of them is music. I'm so grateful that my parents, were very, strict in, I think I've joked before that that's about like the only thing that I can think of where like compulsion and the use of force is warranted against another human being is to make them practice
to learn music.
Because they won't appreciate when they're kids, but when they're older, they sure will. The other thing is just all the, like, as a kid, I had no concept that when I was following my dad around on the construction site or on the farm or around the shop, watching him weld, like nobody's ever taught me how to weld. Like I just watch, and like I'm not a good welder, but I can get stuff to stick together most of the time. But it's deeply satisfying to I mean, there, and like the concept of thrift, like there's been I think one of the most satisfying feelings one of the most satisfying things that I've ever experienced is when like there's a need for something like a tool or a building or just something that hasn't existed before, and you can just like walk out into your junk pile, or like if you know the difference between a junk pile and a collection is just that it's in a row. And so like I can't count how many things that my dad and I've built, or the things that we've repaired just by the stuff that we've kept and organized over the years. And it's so rewarding to be able to like, I'll take that, and this thing used to be this, and then we're gonna cut that and weld this and put a hole through that, and then when you're done with it, it's like a super functional thing. Like it's incredibly rewarding to be involved in that creative process. And and like you said, it's a meaningful hobby, but it also has tangible value. And one of the other things that I learned this year myself is because I spent the last since July basically on site with one of the new regeneration projects that we're working on in British Columbia, which is multiple properties. There's over 30,000 acres that we're working on here, doing all from all the design and implementation for everything. But I've been spending a lot more time. I used to do I had my chores every day, and I was on the farm, and I was still doing a lot of education and consulting and stuff, but I had the farm, and every day I was milking cows, I was feeding pigs, I was lifting buckets and pouring milk into cans into the cream separator, and I was very physical. And like this summer, I've never worked out, I've never lifted weights before. And this summer I gained probably 10 to 15 pounds, and I lost like a huge amount of my conditioning just because I haven't been like working on and I'm still active, but I'm not doing those things that I used to do, which is mind blowing. And so the insight that I had this year is like, because like I was contemplating going to a gym for the first time in my life, and thank God for the pandemic. Otherwise, I probably would have, and I would have got sucked into that culture. But
do you even lift, bro?
With protein shakes and power thirst.
But, it's so funny, Takota, because like our positions have basically flipped, because when I was working in tech, like computer, I was in front of a computer 8 hours a day. And I had to work really hard to keep the extra pounds off. And I was going to the gym and I was doing all that stuff. And then when I quit my desk job and started doing the blacksmithing and working on the homestead with the family here, doesn't even enter my mind anymore.
You don't.
And the weight just stays off.
Totally. And so this is this is probably, I think, one of the best reasons to get into these like pre-electricity skills is it's way cheaper than a gym membership. And if you do it right, you turn it into a business. And so like literally, like I can't wait to we're working on developing like a farm out here on the like kind of bringing a lot of the systems that I have on my farm into this farm. And I can't wait because like literally wherever I go for the rest of my life, I'm always going to have like my setup. And if folks have seen my YouTube videos where I do my chores, like it takes me an hour a day to do my chores. And with that like hour a day of chores, once the system's set up, I can make $40,000 to $50,000 a year off of these chores. And so it's like, or I could go to a gym once a day and I could spend, I don't know what a gym, I'm sure it's like $100 a month, but like, you spend a couple $1,000s a year in a gym membership, or you do like, and it's funny, I have friends who go to the gym and like they have like the farmer carry and like the bucket toss and like the tire flip, and it's like that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. And like I've turned it into a business. And so that's my new like my friend Rob Avis, or I guess Rob too, he calls it farm fit. And there's like
instead of CrossFit.
You could but it's totally different to see like this like functional strength and agility and stability and stuff like that. And but it's so like it's literally like it's cheaper than a gym membership. It's a functional hobby. It'll keep you in shape, and if you turn it into a business, like literally for just a couple hours a day, which is what most people are spending at a gym, you can get all the same benefits and everything else, and it's a hedge, and you might survive the apocalypse.
Exactly. Or at least you can outrun the zombies.
That's right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I used to sell, I never actually got the sign made up, but I wanted to, because I used to have my tool booth set up, and I had some pretty, like I literally had like machetes and bill hooks and Woodman's Pals and sickles and things like that, and everybody couldn't figure out if I was selling gardening tools or weapons. And so if I ever go back into it, I'm gonna get a sign it'll be like gardening tools, and I'll scratch that out and just say it's like apocalypse tool. apocalypse weapons. And I think I'd probably sell a lot more of them now than I did when,
just in case. Yeah, exactly.
So, but on that topic, I'm curious to hear what your answer is this. Okay, so imagine this scenario: the zombies or the Russians or the AI robots or whatever it is, they're coming, and you've got just enough time to grab one tool before you run out to the bush. What's the tool? What's the tool that you grab? I mean, of course, you're bringing your family. It's not like Lorinda or the axe. It's like they're coming with you. What's the one tool you would grab?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think I would, if it's running out into the woods, like needing survival, it would be I think the hori, which is funny because it was a sidearm for the Japanese peasants back when weapons were illegal for them to carry.
Yeah.
But it's also a tool for digging out vegetables and for harvesting. So something like that, sharp, pointy, stab them in the neck, I guess. And then run and dig up some veggies.
There you go.
I don't know. I was thinking the first thing that came to mind too was the broad fork, which is kind of, it's got the crossbar and like the multiple tines sticking down. Yeah. If you held it by the handles in front of you and you just run, you charge with the points in front of you.
Yeah, it's like a pike. Yeah.
Pretty hefty though.
Yeah.
What would you pick?
I for whatever reason, I think it's an axe. Is what I would grab, and for the only reason, I can't remember where this story came from. I think it was somebody in my family or somebody in like the area, but it was like, they were settlers in our area. I can't remember I'm not sure if it's my family or somewhere else who heard this, but basically there was this family of settlers and they came over here with basically like nothing. They hardly had, basically like their bare hands and a few things. And they essentially worked like an entire summer, an entire winter. And then like when the spring came back, they had like earned enough money in like, doing trades and stuff like that to save up just enough money to buy one tool. And wow. I think the father walked, like 2 days and 2 nights to get to like the nearest like trading post, and he bought an axe and then brought it back, and like that was like, that was the technology. So I don't know, that's kind of anchored in my mind.
There you go.
If we're not stuck to I guess this would be considered pre-electrical weapons or electrical tools. It'd be a firearm. I think it'd be like probably like a 223 or something would be in a pocket full of shells. That would be I can't imagine how useful if you if you've got that and you can make a fire and you can at least keep yourself fed and stuff like that. But I honestly don't think about stuff like that. It's all that often. It's more just for fun. There's but
there's there's black powder clubs all over the place too. So there's people out there with the knowledge on how to make that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like hand pack the shells and all that stuff. And
yeah.
I don't know how common gunsmithing is, but there are a few people out there who are like that serious about it, that they can forge a gun. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's next level.
Yeah, it is next level.
Yeah, interesting.
But it's that thing again where people, they take an interest or a passion that they have, and if it's a useful skill, they can potentially turn it into a business.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, it's just something that they enjoy doing, and again, is gaining that confidence from being able to knowing that you can make something that's of value, right?
Yeah, and I think that's like the art of production is such a fundamental need for humans. Like in the same way that like chickens have to scratch and pigs have to root around and cows have to graze grass and horses have to run and and cats have to, play with, balls, like humans have to make stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we go crazy when we don't. And there's so many of those like, quote bullshit jobs out there where people literally, they know on a subconscious level that the work that they do adds no value to society. Their job could just disappear and it wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm sure that causes, I can't imagine personally, but I can only assume that would cause so much, cognitive dissonance and a lack of self-esteem and a lack of meaning and purpose in your life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like really from a kind of a mental health aspect also, I think there's a huge need to just be able to produce something of value that you can trade with other people. I think that is literally a primary need that humans have, and very few people, talk about that desire for production, and that there are other ways to achieve that production. If you are, working in the field of ideas, or like he doesn't have to be blacksmithing, but
No.
if you work, in an office job, and you are like David Graeber wrote a book called Bullshit Jobs, and it was like 70% of the work in like Western society, the jobs are they could all disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice anything. And which is funny because I think I've talked about this in the podcast before, but it's a really important idea that I've heard him touch. He just passed away, I think it was last year. But one of the talks I heard him give was super insightful. He was talking about the psychological damage that these bullshit jobs have on people. And the first is because they know they're not producing anything of value, and they know that they're they're not contributing anything back, and things like that. But that everybody gets that. But there's a second kind of really just sick, almost like insidious aspect of this whole kind of bullshit jobs concept, which is our entire culture is based on the idea that like trying to get to the point where you get something for nothing. So where you're making tons of money and you're just laying on a beach and you're relaxing. And so like our culture has taught us that like the American dream, or the ideal lifestyle, is to do as close to nothing as possible, and then have as much wealth and abundance as you can get. So basically our culture is it's focused on the stuff and not the production of the stuff. And so these people who live in these bullshit jobs, this guy David Graeber basically says it causes a huge amount of psychological damage and emotional damage, because they know that what they're doing isn't productive, but they feel like they should be happy and they're not.
Yeah.
And so it causes this extra thing where like you can't talk about it, because I have you're looking around, everybody says I should be happy. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And it's like a mind warp to get into that space. And I know people who are some kind of subconsciously struggling with that battle. And so the solution is, like we've been talking about, is to just say, piss on what society says you want, go out and do something, go out and make something, learn a skill, and just feel the excitement and the confidence and the self-esteem that comes with the ability to make something from nothing, or take other things that people have made and combine them into something. It's incredibly meaningful.
Gaining competence, knowing that you are competent at something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, in the process of practicing whatever skill or hobby or trade practice you want to call it, I think it can create space for people to start thinking for themselves and start getting away from what society is telling you or telling these people. Is like, this is what you need to be happy. But in the process of practicing those skills, like I was saying, it's like maybe that creates a little bit of space in their minds to start thinking like, what do I actually want from life?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you said that, it reminded me of one of my favorite quotes from Bill Mollison. And it goes like this. He said, the fundamental problem with all revolutions is that they print more words and bullets than they do food and shelter. And they're fundamentally reliant on the system they're trying to destroy.
Mm.
And so it's like on like coming back to this, like what you're saying is like, you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you. Like people who have no skills and literally are dependent, like they've got a bullshit job that they, on a subconscious level know that if it went away, nobody would miss it. Like the level of threat that you would perceive on a conscious level, a subconscious level, it would be enormous. But even more so is like, then because you know that you are dependent upon the system and dependent on other people who actually do produce things, it turns you into like a parasite kind of where you almost become part of the system in the aspects of it. Like it kind of becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like these people can't let the system die, and we can't, like, we're stuck in this fiat currency bureaucratic nightmare. Everybody knows it's bullshit. Everybody knows there's corruption, but everybody's like, well, it's not that bad, and maybe do we just need 4 more years, and we'll once we can vote in Mr. X, it'll solve. It's like, you don't believe that for a second, but you know that if you rock the boat too much and like we get into a revolutionary stage, you're screwed. And so these people are literally kind of enforcing the system because they're dependent on the system. And so
the system gets people dependent on it too. Like that's all part of a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, like I'm really happy with that. Like, I feel like that kind of paints a really comprehensive picture of like why, like, 'cause it's not just blacksmithing. Like it's just any functional skill, I would say. And whether how far back you want to go is super useful for a bunch of different reasons. And I highly encourage people to get into it and just start with one. Like, you don't have to master everything. But it, like if you take whatever time that you're using to play video games or watch Netflix, and I'm not saying like
there's social media
or social media or sports. Like I'm not saying you shouldn't keep doing those things, but like just take a fraction of it, a couple hours a week, and just shift it into some functional thing. Like, and I mean, it's funny, like there's like some of the most popular YouTube videos, like hundreds of millions of views, are literally like they're how-to videos, or like watch somebody build a hut in the middle of the rainforest with like
watch people.
And it's like the paradox is like, it's so wild. Like, people are like getting vicarious like self-esteem and like apocalypse insurance by sitting in front of a screen watching a guy make his own Adobe bricks in the Amazon. It's like
I watched a guy build his own hut once. I'm good.
It's great.
Well, and what's the exact opposite, which is just like so crazy, is people watching other people watch stuff or play video games or
that's a whole other
isn't that crazy?
Commentators on commentators on commentators. It's the infinite regress. Like very, very soon 90% of the energy humanity uses will be to run YouTube algorithms to help people find videos of people who find videos of YouTube. Like, it's like the Russian doll.
It's so crazy.
Okay, so I'm really curious. You mentioned this concept of Desensus, and I have never heard this word. And because I am a lifelong learner, I am very keen to add another multi-syllable word
Words.
to my vocabulary.
So I'm not exactly certain on, it's not my word. I didn't make this up. It was an idea I came across from a writer. His name's John Michael Greer. He's an American author. He's written a number of books on basically facing decline, and basically the limits of energy, what our society is facing, that kind of thing. Yeah. And Desensus basically is the opposite of consensus. So instead of everybody trying to come to a consensus on we should all pursue strategy X, we should all become blacksmiths, we should all become farmers. It's basically what you and I have been talking about all evening, is like, maybe if you like bread baking, you should pursue bread baking. Someone learn how to do music, someone learn how to build instruments. And then we're talking about hedging bets too. So some people are going to pursue old world skills, like me with blacksmithing. Some people are gonna explore the interface between cryptocurrency and regenerative farming, like you, right? Like, it's the idea, and I don't know that he intended it, but to me, it seems that it really fits one of the permaculture principles or design principles of resilience, where we have, instead of a monoculture of everybody pursuing the same strategy or idea, we have a meadow or a food forest or whatever you want to call it, of a bunch of people going their own way, basically. So, and one of the advantages to that strategy is that it's impossible to predict what's going to happen in the future. But if we have enough people pursuing enough paths, one or more of those paths are going to end up being of benefit to society. And then that can help pave the way for others, so that our society is not so brittle and fragile. It actually can respond more effectively to changes that come. And yeah, it's an amazing concept. And I encourage, the last thing I want to do is to try and get everybody to do the same thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that's a really interesting idea, and I'm gonna push back on it.
Sure.
But like I everything you said I agree with, but there was one part in it that the way you phrased it was like the basically and this wasn't your only justification for it, but this is an interesting it's an interesting lens into kind of like the subtleties of ways of looking at things. And so I want to explore this with you. So the way you phrased it was like following this practice of Desensus, which is basically a bunch of different people kind of pursuing their own self-interest and focusing on different skills, was the kind of the justification for that was that it benefits society in the event of some kind of a disaster, or because, like you said, we can never predict what the future is going to be like. And so, having a society where people are, and you didn't use this word, but like you didn't say people are free to kind of do whatever they want, and the benefit of it. But and so I'm not necessarily saying that you were saying these ideas, but one of the things that really concerns me about the future that we're moving into is this idea of kind of consensus, but from a it's more like compulsion. Like, no, like these problems are so big, they're so vast, we all have to agree this is the way. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and so so I agree with you that Desensus as a strategy makes a ton of sense, but the reason why Desensus should be allowed or it should be encouraged by society isn't because society will benefit from it. It's because it's the only moral kind of society you can live in. And it's a subtle difference, but I don't know what one of the things that I've been doing a ton of research in is like studying. Actually, I want to change my answer to my, like, if the zombies are coming, the apocalypse is not, Terminator is stomping towards my house, and I've got one thing that I can take with me. And it'd be hard to pick one, so I'll cheat, and I will say I have a bookshelf that I've got hundreds of different books, but I would take everything that Ayn Rand ever wrote. So Ayn Rand is a philosopher. Most people hate her guts.
Yeah. I've not actually read any of her stuff personally.
Okay, yeah. So most people haven't. There's been more people who've read things about what people who say they know what Ayn Rand said than what Ayn Rand actually said. Yeah. There's been way more commentators of Rand.
I'm sure.
And so, anyways, but if you actually read what she's saying, it's brilliant. And it basically, it comes down to this concept, like one of her core principles is this idea of mutual consent to mutual benefit. And the idea that, like, people have to be free to pursue their own self-interest without compulsion or force or violence or fraud from anybody else, but not because that's what's best for society, but because that is what is right. Like, that is what is the moral and the good. And it's a subtle difference, and if some people don't, without spending a lot of time on it, wouldn't get it. But it's a difference that makes all the difference in the world, particularly as we are heading towards a world of more and more kind of collectivism and this idea that authoritarianism and all of those systems. If you look back in history, all of the worst atrocities in human history has always been done for the good of the people. For future generations, for the children, for the
we're doing this for your own good.
For your own good, right? And it's always this: the ends justify the means kind of a thing. And so that's the only thing I wanted to just touch on just briefly, is like this idea of Desensus as a strategy. It makes absolute sense, but I just want to be kind of hone in on that idea of it makes sense as a strategy, not because it's what's best for society. It's because it is the only way to live in a system that doesn't end up in tyranny. Because if people are compelled to, say, behave
one way or the other,
and like, I mean, you look at a lot of these sustainability goals that the UN or the World Economic Forum and all these places, you read them, they all sound great. And most people would agree, like, yeah, like, we need to have clean air. We need to have clean water. It'd be great if people had enough food to eat. It'd be great if people weren't living in poverty. But where it comes down to is
do you compel people to achieve those goals?
Like, what if somebody says no? Are you gonna force them? Like, is it, do the ends justify? Does this wonderful omelet that you're gonna make warrant cracking a few eggs? Yeah, right. And
no, that's a good point, Takota. And I didn't mean or want to imply that society means you all need to be doing different things because society says so.
No.
In my opinion, society and like culture and all this stuff is an emergent system, and it emerges from an organic process of people agreeing on things that work generally,
from
right?
Individuals, yeah, exactly.
But that's a really interesting perspective, though, to look at it from a moral standpoint, like allowing people to basically do what they're going to do and let them be is actually for the good. And it's like, I agree with you, because a society otherwise is always compelling people to behave one way or the other, right?
Yep. And so what I like about this concept of Desensus is this idea that which I'd never heard of before. Like, the concept of consensus is an important aspect whenever people are going to like whenever you have more than one person who's entering in, like, working together, there has to be consensus, because otherwise it's not mutual consent to mutual benefit. However,
Yeah.
like people have to be free to do whatever they want, so long as it doesn't harm somebody else. And part of that is like people have to be free to hurt themselves. People have to be free to make mistakes. People have to be free to potentially kill themselves. But it's such a slippery slope when, again, this concept of like consensus and agreement, like it's wrapped up in all these for the good of the people, and we all have to agree and we all have to work together, and the greatest good for the greatest number. They all sound so good on the surface level, but when you actually get into what happens if I say no? Like what happens if the strategy that you're talking about I disagree with? Are you going to force me to do what you think is right? And if you are, then you're, as long as I'm not hurting anybody, you have no right to use force or fraud to try to work, progress your agenda, no matter how good and beneficial it is. And so it's a subtle difference, but if we aren't super clear on this, and this is what I like about this concept of Desensus, is that it embodies that principle of individualism and the right to disagree, so long as you're not harming anybody else, and the benefit that it has. But I just the thing that I wanted to focus on is that the benefits are a bonus. Like even if it didn't benefit society, it has value in and of itself. It's not a means to an end; it is an end. The idea that people have to be free to pursue divergent goals is core to a sustainable or a stable a civilization where people aren't devolving into either tyranny or tribalism or some other form of force or fraud.
Yeah, those are good points. Yeah, it's all the points you brought up. They're so like in my face right now, basically, of like it's making me think twice. And it feels like every 10 years is kind of like this big transition, but now I think, because generally
it's almost like it's planned.
Yeah. Done well enough. Yeah, that's weird, eh?
Yeah. 10 years on the dot.
But funny. Yeah, it's got me thinking. It's like, if I disagree, what
are you gonna do?
What am I gonna do? And the options are pretty narrow. There's actually, so in Creston, in this area, there's a homesteader support group that started up, and basically their objective is to start creating a parallel society.
Okay, yeah.
To the one that exists. Yeah. Because there's like, what other options are there if you disagree? If you disagree with the way things have been going on, like with government, like the way it's all set up now, it's like, what are your options? So people are looking for ways to adapt to that and find a way around it.
Yeah, and so that's the piece that I want to stress is like this. So this strategy of Desensus is a really good one. The idea of your what did you call it, the homesteader support group, and like those are super valuable and they're super important. But what I've been noticing, as I've been doing more research into Rand and her philosophy and trying to get down into like what is the right thing, like how do we tell what's right from wrong? Is it just this subjective thing that kind of depends on where you are and what time, or is there like an absolute that no matter what, and like no matter what scenario you can throw at it, there's something at the core that you can use to say this is right, this is wrong. And I believe that principle is this idea of like the principle of non-aggression or mutual consent to mutual benefit is so important. And so, but why I'm bringing this up again is what I've seen in a lot of these like homesteader groups and like the preppers and things like that is is like, well, we'll just agree to disagree, and like you can have your system and we'll have ours, and we'll just kind of see. And what I think is really important is to make a value judgment. Like what is happening in the world right now is wrong. It is evil from the perspective of it is causing suffering, and it is done intentionally. Like it is intentional malice. And what's even more of a mind warp is that it's done under the guise of it's for your own good. Like it's this weird, like sadomasochistic relationship that has developed between government and its people. And so it is it's super critical. Yes, we have to separate, we have to build parallel societies, because the current system is literally crumbling under our feet. But as we're doing that, I feel it is imperative that we look back at the old society and we say that is wrong, and it's wrong for this reason, and it's wrong because that society, the way that system was developing, was devolving into compulsion and force, and always under the guise of for the common good, for grandma, for the future, whatever it is. But no matter how beautiful the vision, if it comes at the point of a gun, or the threat of your banks being seized, or your children being taken away, or whatever threat that they're going to throw, it's wrong. Even if, and so this is, we're talking about the vaccine and all this stuff, and this is the point that I am adamant about, is even if the vaccine was safe and effective, if it was 100% conclusive, it was safe and effective, if somebody said no to it, and there was guaranteed, like, here's the science, there's no person has ever gotten sick, there's zero adverse, there's nothing. If somebody said no to the vaccine, nobody would have a right to force that person to take it, because people have to be free to hurt themselves. They're not free to hurt other people. But again, this is where, if the vaccine is safe and effective, everybody else who's taken it is protected.
Yeah.
And end of story. And so this is, in my mind, and I believe this is being done intentionally by the bureaucrats who realize that their bullshit jobs add zero value to anything, and that the only way that they can perpetuate their parasitical existence is to create, these Hegelian dialectics of problem, reaction, solution, so that they can justify their own existence and their increasing salaries and more of their buddies to get into the game. They have to have a boogeyman that they say, oh, if we weren't around, thank goodness
you guys would be in so much trouble.
So much trouble. So thank goodness we're here. And so people need to understand why that's wrong. Like, and it's funny, like there's so many people that are spending time researching all these different conspiracy theories. And I've got one of my first podcasts was about the conspiracy. I've done several on them. And I'm not saying don't research into them, but there's one thing you need to know about this entire pandemic and the lockdowns and the masks and all this stuff. There's one thing. And that is, it is immoral to initiate force against another individual. It is immoral to use force or fraud against somebody else to compel them to see the world your way. Now, what's the fine line here is that the governments are imposing this on private businesses who have private property, and that's where it gets a little messy, because if you own property, like property rights come from individual rights, and so if you own your life, you own the products of your labor. And that's what property rights are, an extension of your individual rights. And so, and those individual rights have to come with the concept of the right to refuse, because if you don't own it, like if you own it, you have to be able to own, to say no, and to say how whatever your property will be used. And so, and this is the fine line, is that it is immoral, it is wrong for the government to say on like public property, or to force businesses to, invoke, vaccine or mask mandates or whatever it is. It's immoral for the government to do it. But if a private business posts a sign and says, you must wear masks to enter our business, or you have to have a vaccine passed, to enter our business, then it's different. And it shifts, because now it's on private property. Now, of course,
and they should be able to do what they want to do on their own property, right?
They have to be, because again,
as long as it doesn't cause harm to others.
As long as it doesn't cause harm to others. And but yeah. This is where, like, again, it gets messy, because the government is compelling the businesses under force of threat. And so that's yes. where it's tricky. But
yeah,
like it's a really messy thing. And so anyways, I don't want to devolve into a philosophical discussion here. I think it's really important, but
too late for that.
Yeah. There
was one thing. Oh, sorry. There's just one thing I wanted to say about what you were saying there about the like making value judgments, like recognizing that value judgments exist, and they're not the same thing as basically stating fact or anything like that. Like they are their own category of being. Like you can't. One person's value judgment is not necessarily like objective fact, is what I'm saying.
So that's where I disagree with you.
Well, that's interesting.
So because again, because if it's wrong, at what point does the concept of mutual consent to mutual benefit, or the principle of non-aggression, for what person would that be allowed? Like what aspect of kind of subjectivity or personal preference would it be okay for that particular principle be forgotten? And in my mind, the answer is nobody. And so this is where I really like Rand's philosophical approaches, because you are right. There are certain things that are value judgments that are subjective, and they come down to personal preference, and there's no reason to to make things black and white. But there are also things, I believe, that can be, like I was saying, can be a fundamental absolute. There is no like if this goes society, or if this goes civilization and decade era, centuries of progression towards this idea will be lost.
It's a willingness to call evil evil.
Yeah,
I think is what you're trying to say. And it's funny, because it seems like our society, or I guess postmodernism, I don't know if that's the right word for it, but our culture has been basically trying to erase all boundaries and values. So it's all relative.
Yep.
Relative moral relativism.
Yeah, moral relativism. Yes, absolutely.
And
yep.
I tend personally, like for my own philosophy, I tend to lean more towards that there are things out there that are truly abhorrent and I would call evil.
Yeah.
And like that, I guess, are you saying that something like that is an objective truth? So it's not necessarily like, if you judge an action as being evil, is that
yes,
no longer, or is the value judgment that also is an objective fact?
So
is that right?
So this I think what you're saying is, is that a fact about reality, or is that our perspective, is kind of what you're asking. Is like from an like atomic, like the nature of the substance of the universe, does this actually matter, or is it all relative? And so this is where I really like Rand's perspective on this, is because now there are certain things that I don't agree with Rand, and I've talked about them in past podcasts, and I'll mention them here again, because everybody loves to shit all over Ayn Rand and without actually reading your stuff, without actually reading what she said. They just read blogs about that. I don't want to get into it, but it's her argument is that these are her philosophical system is called objectivism.
Mm-hmm.
And meaning like that there are objective facts about reality that stem into the ethical and epistemological and kind of
Okay.
realm that and we can, in the same way that we can look at gravity and we can observe patterns that are like natural forces of the universe, like no matter how many times I do this, it's never going to go up. And people have been doing this for a long time, and never once has it gone up. And so, of course, unless you read certain books that claim that it happened, and there's stuff like that. But let's not get into that. That's another podcast. But like there are objective facts about reality that we can perceive, and we can create hypotheses and test them, and we get repeatable events happening. They're predictable. And so she basically takes that same idea, and that there are patterns about epistemology or how we come to know things. There are facts about ethics, about what is right, what is the better and worse ways to live within reality. And so one of those, like, that's how she defines ethics, is basically ethics is the study of better and worse human values as it relates to the nature of reality. And so this concept of mutual consent and mutual benefit, it's actually pretty simple. Her logic is if one of her kind of absolutes in that you can observe from natural systems is one, existence exists. So like at some level, when you get down
to start somewhere,
existence exists. Can we just agree to that? It's crazy. There are some people who think it doesn't.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what my favorite argument against those people is?
What's that?
Well, I can't hear you then. You don't exist in my reality. So
that's like what is it, solipsism or whatever? It's like you're the only conscious thinking being. Yeah. And everyone else is just figments of your imagination or something.
Totally. Crazy. So it's like existence exists. Another one is A is A, which is basically the law of identity, which is like something cannot be itself and something else at the same time. And I know there's all kinds of string theory and quantum mechanic experiments that prove that. Look into them a little more. You'd be amazed at how many different religious and even now scientific things have been trying to break this down. And the reason they're breaking it down is so that they can say, well, you don't exist. In my reality, you don't exist, and therefore I can do whatever you want. And they absolve themselves from
whatever I want to you.
Responsibility. There's a goal behind all of these mystical and now pseudoscientific agendas. It's sinister. So existence exists, the law of identity, A is A. And another one is basically a kind of corollary to that A is A is there are no contradictions. And so now I'm going to take that last one and I'm going to apply it to this concept of mutual consent and mutual benefit. And so what right do you have to say, well, I disagree and you can't force me? But then when somebody else says, well, I disagree, and you say, well, you have to. And so if you force somebody else, what possible argument could you use to say that somebody else can't force you? There's none. You're caught in a contradiction. It's hypocritical. There's no justification for it. And so now she goes deeper into like a metaphysical understanding of how reality works and why basically humans have to have the right of freedom and individualism are essential aspects of reality. And therefore the ethics around it is actually an objective fact. But that right there is, in my opinion, her best argument is it is objective reality, because like, essentially it's the golden rule. It's like, treat others the way that you'd want to be treated. Because what possible right would you have to to claim an exception to your own rule. And so
I see what you're saying.
And of course that's from a that also stems into, it's in your own best interest to do that, because sure, you might force your will on somebody else today, but it'll just open up a scenario where they'll come back at you and you won't have a leg to stand on when you say, no, that's wrong, you can't do that. So that there's a practical aspect of it too, but from a like an objective fact about reality, like what right do you have to claim a contradiction? And so anyways, it's I'm glad you are semi-interested in this concept.
Well, I'm gonna have to do some reading on it for sure.
Yeah.
This is all new to me. I've heard of objectivism before, but never fully understood what it was about. And I still don't. I would have to do some reading. But it's interesting when you're talking about, maybe this is related to the mutual consent for mutual benefit, but I was reading a book recently by Jordan Peterson where he was talking about how the relationship between the tyrant and the slave, and this is just in personal relationships. You have tyranny, negotiation, and slavery. And negotiation is hard. Yeah. And it's basically coming to that mutual benefit. Like both parties are agreeing to something. But if you have the tyrant and the slave relationship, both suffer from that choice, because the slave is going to, like, out of resentment, not be the best human they can be, and the tyrant is not getting the best from that person, right? The slave that's working underneath them. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So is that from his new book?
Yes. What was it called again? Beyond Order, I think. Yeah, Beyond Order.
I haven't read his. I petered out on Jordan Peterson. No pun intended. But there's I want to take that thought just a little bit further, is and this comes back to why I was stressing, like, the people that are exiting these society right now to build these parallel societies. And I've heard there's a bunch of their names I've heard from them, and it is super important that we do that that we walk away, which is, if you cliffhanger, that's what happens in Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged, is basically a certain set of the people, the producers of society, they walk away and they build their own parallel society, and they let the rest of the world collapse. But there is a critical point, and this is what Ayn Rand's entire philosophy and ethics is about, is in order to truly do this, in order for people to walk away from society, they have to have the concept of moral authority, or they have to know that they're right. You can't just feel it. You can't just agree to disagree. You have to know with absolute certainty that what you are doing is ethical, it is moral, it is right, and by corollary, what everybody else is doing is wrong. And so now I want to bring it back to that slave and tyrant thing, is because what's the best way to control a slave?
I don't know. I've never thought about it. Honestly.
Yeah, I swear I haven't either. This is I read this. This was.
Is this a bad joke?
Not quite. No.
No.
But so the best. So a lot of people think that's that when you think of like a slave, you think of like the whip.
Of course, yeah. The whip.
Do what I say, or I'll hurt you.
Yeah.
Right. Now the problem with fear is that what happens when the whipper goes to sleep, or he turns his back, or he's got his pants around his ankles, or
vengeance, retaliation,
or he happens to be out in the woods with 10 or 15 slaves.
10, exactly. Yeah.
So this is where fear is not the best way to control slaves. Guilt is. If you can convince the slave that they deserve
what they're getting
to be a slave, that they deserve it, they'll never fight back. They won't. They will never fight back. And so this is where this concept of when we walk away from society, we have to be absolutely certain that we are right, and the the control system, no matter how virtuous it claims to be, and no matter how much for the good of the people it is, because it is using force and I would argue fraud based on my own personal, but we don't even have to prove the fraud. We just have like they're saying, no, our science says this, and so therefore you have to do it. As soon as somebody says that,
Yes.
and then they put threats in, or we'll take your money, or we'll take your kids, or we won't let you go into certain businesses, or you'll lose your job, or whatever it is, or you can't get public. We're going to impose a separate tax on you. Any of those things, they are evil. They are absolutely wrong, and people have to be able to say that's wrong, because if we don't, we're never going to be free. And these new parallel societies that we're building are going to have the same seeds of destruction built into them from the get-go. And so this is why, no joke, I've said this on their podcast, I just remembered it now. It's like, if the zombies are coming, the one thing I'm grabbing is my Ayn Rand bookshelf, because the ideas in those books about the metaphysics, like what reality is, epistemology, how we come to know about reality, ethics, politics, all of those different things, that's what we need to build a society, so that when people have all these different skills, like the blacksmith so that we can build a society that people can engage again in mutual consent and mutual benefit, and we can build ourselves out of this. Because otherwise, it's going to be it's going to be like the Guess Who song, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And I guarantee you, in these parallels,
we want it to be more like the Rush song, Closer to the Heart.
That's right. Yeah.
Lyrics written, Neil Peart was a huge Ayn Rand fan, right?
Oh, what? I did not know that.
Oh yeah, it informed a lot of his lyrics. And I think listen to that song, Closer to the Heart.
I'll have to.
And you'd be like, okay.
Yeah. I don't think
that came to mind when you mentioned that. It's crazy.
I think I've only ever listened to Come Sail Away at high school parties. Is the only.
Oh man, well, that's good. That's a lot to think about. It's Learn and I have been struggling about whether to actually get involved with these groups that are trying to build parallel societies. Yeah. Not sure. We've been struggling a lot just dealing emotionally and psychologically with all the stuff that's been going on.
Yeah.
And feeling like there's so few options in terms of working within the system as it is. Yeah. It seems it's coming to the point where we're just realizing that there's almost nothing we can do.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing is you don't negotiate at the point of a gun.
Yeah.
You don't. There's no, like, when somebody pulls out a gun or uses force or fraud or whatever, there's no more argument. It's just do as I say. And so, like, at that point, you either just follow orders or you walk away.
If you can.
And the thing is, like, I'm not at all advocating revolt or anything like that, because the weapons that our current military industrial complex has would just love to crush down any kind of civil disobedience, and that would be the boogeyman that they would use to justify more and more tyrannical systems.
That's right.
And so the only way to get out of this is to walk away. But that being said, like, this is where I have yet to join any of these parallel systems. I get lots of invites, and there's people who are talking about gathering them, but the people who are leading these systems or the groups themselves they're not consistent. They haven't identified the principles upon which they're running away from something. They're not running towards something.
Right.
And what they're running away from, they don't even understand why it's wrong. It's just out of fear, and they're bringing all their guilt and stuff with them, and it's just riddled with contradictions. And like, one of the things I think is so funny is the Freedom Convoy and the protests and things like that. It's like, you don't ask for your freedom back. Like, the contradiction wrapped up in that thing. It's like, please, please, please give us our freedom back. It's like, you had no right. Like, they never had it. Like, you being there protesting, asking for it back, proves that they have it. Like, the only solution would be for those truckers to pull out and move out and create their own society based on one principle: mutual consent to mutual benefit. And to understand why that principle is absolutely critical. And I'm not saying like they're like the people that are engaged in that they're good people. They're not. They've done some incredible things, and if anything, they've shown the value that they have shown is how tyrannical the system is. But I mean, the thing with state propaganda is like people either get it or they don't, and it's like at what point do we just like, I don't know. So that's where I'm at. Is like I personally don't engage in protests. I don't sign petitions. I don't ask for my freedom back. I don't participate in discussions about how much land rights I should have. To me, the whole thing is just absurd. I refuse to engage in it. I won't give it a moment of my time. You have no right to compel me to do what I want. And if now, that being said, if somebody tries to force me to do something, then I will take part. But until then, I'm building my own parallel society within the community that we're developing out here in this project. And but a core part of what we're doing is our philosophy and our principles. And so I guess to kind of bring this full circle is it's one thing to have these skills, which is super valuable. But like if people don't invest in the philosophy and the ethics and the like understanding that like no one has a right to force you to do something against your will, no matter how what the justification is. Unless you get that, it won't matter how good you are at homesteading or what gardening, what levels, because eventually the people at the top, the parasites at the top, they'll come up with some crafty little narrative where it's just like, oh, like you're not against grandmothers, are you? Like if you don't do this, well, your grandmother could. Or what about the children? What about that? What about the polar bears? What about the babies? They'll keep trying and
they'll find something
and trying until you say, okay, that you're right. You know what? I can't say no to that. I will. I can't rank. It was one of the founding fathers said, those that would sacrifice liberty for security will get none and deserve neither. Yeah. And so, but to say that and truly mean it, yeah, it takes a ton of and actually, so this is going to bring it back even more full circle. Is one of my favorite things about physical work is the meditative aspect of it. The contemplative, like you're doing something, you're in a rhythm. Like scything is one of my favorite things. And I'm either listening to an audiobook or I'm thinking about a problem. Like your body is kind of busy in something, and you're free to. It's a working. I call it working meditations. And the insights that you have from it. And so these two things kind of go hand in hand, because one, you are learning a skill that will allow you to bite the hand that's feeding you. So you won't feel dependent upon it. So you'll actually be able to say no to it with conviction, and not just, well, no, and then come scuttling back when the power goes out and, for your food stamps or whatever.
Yeah.
And, but it'll actually help you to, like I said, stay fit, stay healthy, and provide time to think. There's like you don't, like, I don't know if you, but you like, I don't think when I'm watching a movie. Like your brains are, you're playing, like I don't play video games anymore, but like when I'm watching a movie, and I still do, I'm not saying don't watch movies or even South Park's one of my favorite shows. It's one of my guilty pleasures. But when you're working, like it's a different state of mind. And it'd be interesting to see like the correlation between like the true, like kind of free thinkers, or the people who are freedom lovers, and like how much kind of physical activity or their like production that they're involved in, and like the self-esteem that comes out of that, and the feeling of accomplishment and all those different things. Like it's there's so much value in learning these just any kind of a production skill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, spending the time, like you said, in whether it's a meditative type of process, or I think honestly just having the time to yourself and some quiet to let your mind start doing some thinking for itself.
Yeah,
because we're constantly bombarded by people's opinions, ideas, media, propaganda. Think this, think that, do this, do that. And it seems that there's a increasing push to have this more and more in our lives all the time. And that's part of this lifestyle that we're building out here, is actually creating some of that more of that open space. So it gives us the time to identify I guess it relates to what we were talking about, is what do we actually want our lives to look like?
Yeah.
Instead of being told this is what you want your life to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Like, that is, you give me so much to think about from this talk. It's pretty crazy. It's because you're right. Like, if people are just running away from a system out of basically just a reaction out of fear, like, I don't want to be any part of this, but not giving thought to what is it that we're trying to build. And it's coming it's not a reaction to avoid a thing. You're acting to create a thing, right?
It's a subtle shift, but it makes all the difference in the world. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is if we're saying history repeats itself, or those who don't study history are bound to repeat it. And when I look back at, the one thing that gives me hope is when you look back at the last several thousand years, humanity has becoming more and more free and more individualistic, and individualistic in the sense of the from an ethical perspective, not from a isolated or a independence kind of level. I mean from a moral perspective, that the individual has a right to every person has the right to exist in and of themselves, not as part of the group or
collective or a tribe or whatever.
That's collectivism, right? And so that's what I mean by individualism. And so we have been slowly moving towards away from that we started out with tribalism, and then there was monarchies, and now there's politician. Like, we're slowly moving away from single or certain groups having control of others to more and more freedom. But and so that gives me hope, is that trend will continue. But the thing that does concern me is that the technology that exists today has the ability to create a dystopian control grid, basically 1984 style tyranny, that the likes of which we can't even imagine. And so we are, I feel like we're at a precipice where we will either take the next logical step, which is it was wrong for the tribe for us to be sacrificed to the tribe. It was wrong for us to be sacrificed on the altar to God. It was wrong for us to be enslaved to monarchs. It was wrong for us to be, voted into, certain things by by the majority. We're getting closer and closer to the truth all the time. But if we don't make the next logical step, where it's the individual they have a right to exist in and of themselves, and the use of force to compel somebody to do something against their will is wrong. If we don't make that logical step, we have the potential, for the first time in thousands of years, to start declining towards more and more totalitarianism and more slavery, for the first time, because there are now the tools to do this. I mean, you read the books like 1984 and Brave New World, where they've got this high level tech and everybody's sedated with drugs or alcohol, and anybody who has a glimmering of what's going on is found out immediately through various means. I'm pretty sure you and I are on the top of the government's hit list after this podcast. But if we don't if we don't say no and mean it and know why we're saying no, if we don't get rid of that guilt, they'll always have us. And that's their biggest control mechanism. It's way more powerful than the whip.
Is the guilt.
It's
yeah.
the guilt. Yeah.
I'm seeing that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's like our hopes and concerns are sort of the inverse of one another, because like you're right, with the way technology is developed and where it's at now, it is very possible for them to basically develop like a tech, what do you call it? Like a technocratic,
technocracy,
authoritarianism, or like that kind of thing. But it's my hope actually that depleting energy supplies will make it impossible for them to fully implement that system, because with the disruptions in supply chains and whatnot, it's basically going to fall apart before they have a chance to fully establish that. And I don't know. And then maybe if that were to happen, maybe that continuing trend towards the ultimate value of the individual that trend will continue. Who knows? Perhaps.
Well, maybe I'm a little more cynical than you. I tend to think that the collapse of the supply chains are being done intentionally to. I mean, just think about it. It's like, oh, you don't have any food? Oh, it's because the truckers they're refusing to work. Just give us a bit more power. Make us force them to do their jobs.
Well, again, it's I guess maybe where my optimism is grounded is in the basic cussedness of people, and they'll always find a way to worm around these systems. Like you can see stories of that in the communist regimes and other authoritarian systems. They found ways to get around it, but that's not the ideal.
No, it's not. But the thing is, and this is something I learned from Rand, is I don't know if you've read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
Bits and pieces of it, yeah. Yeah,
but it's devastating to hear that man's account of living, I think it was 10 years in the prison camps, all because he wrote a letter, making some offhand comments about the military, and he was an officer, and they just, you're in prison now, and we'll torture you until you confess to all these crimes, and we'll drag your whole family into it and everything else. In 10 years he was literally a slave, hauling muck out of pens and all different things. But what most people don't know about it, and I didn't know until I read Rand, is that Solzhenitsyn was pro-communism. He basically, there's a letter that he wrote that she, in one of her essays, she basically condemned him because he basically wrote this letter to, I think it was like an open letter to Moscow or something, and in it he basically says, to the government, do whatever you want to everybody else, but for God's sakes, let the arts be free. Let the journalists and the creatives, please don't compel them into like, you can't censor them because it's wrong. But yes, we still need the Gulag, and
everything else is okay.
Everything else is okay. And so this is the thing, like what I was talking about, like this, it's the most important thing that people can get out of this is yes, a skill and everything like that, but it's a philosophy. It's the moral authority to say this is wrong, this is why it's wrong, and this is why we need to create a new society. Like one of the, again, just another thought experiment. Assume that all the protesters, whether it's the Freedom Convoy or anybody who's ever taken part in any rally, anything you've ever seen, all the signs, if every single thing on those signs that you've ever seen, if the government said, they looked at all of them and said, yep, we're going to do all this, we're going to grant all your wishes, we're going to move it back to, what would stop it from happening next year, 2 years from now, 10 years from now?
That's one of the big issues that we're facing.
So what we're seeing right now is not a bug in the system, it's a feature. This was designed into our political system, whether it was by by default or by design, whatever. But it's a feature, and we don't just need to vote somebody else new in or add another right to the Charter of Rights and Human. We need a complete revamp of our entire political, legal, and military systems based on an understanding of morality and why it is wrong to initiate force against somebody else. And anything short of that is a failure. And so and people might think I'm dogmatic about this, and I've been trying to get somebody else other people to come on the podcast to have this discussion around, for example, there's talk about, anarchy versus, libertarianism versus objectivism.
Like, what are the other systems?
Yeah, what are the other systems alternative to unlimited majority rule, or socialism or communism or whatever. But and so if there's anybody out there who's listening to this who has that skill set and wants to have a conversation, I would love to have it, because I've also looked into all those other systems too, and I feel and I would love to be wrong, but I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of why this is the only system. And we need to be we need to think at that level. But and this is kind of like a chicken or an egg thing, is I don't know what needs to come first. I don't know if people need to learn some basic skills before they can truly adopt this idea of kind of objectivism, or if they need to adopt objectivism first and then learn some skills. I tend to think that it'll be easier for somebody to take this kind of pill with the sugar of some basic skills and feeling like you can bite the hand that's feeding you. But I also hope that people can do it in tandem, because it takes a long time to learn a skill. But if somebody can listen to what I'm saying about these principles and this new ethical framework based on individualism, it doesn't take very long, 5-10 minutes, and then maybe read some 20 or 30 hours of Rand and have some discussions and debate. But how long did it take you to get reasonably good at blacksmithing?
I would say that I'm at a level now where I consider myself competent, and it's been 6 years of full-time work. Yeah. We don't have that much time, folks. So, no. Okay, that solves that. Yeah, it's you gotta start reading first. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I think we just did 2 hours.
Wow.
That was a good chat.
It was a good chat.
Yeah.
That's some interesting, man. It's I think that question you had too about whether to start with the skill or the philosophy, I think you're right. It has to be a tandem thing.
Yeah.
I think picking a skill, it's a much smaller bite to chew, because when we get into the bigger question of walking away from the existing system and creating a new one, that's definitely one that's hard to face. But
although I will raise your practical, I'll see your practical argument, and I'll raise you another philosophical argument. Which is, it'll probably be easier to motivate somebody once they stop feeling guilty for being alive, and once they feel like the only justification for their existence is to,
consume
service to others, right? And so. Yeah. Again, this depending where some people have never truly adopted this ethic of collectivism and altruism, and please don't confuse altruism with kindness to others. This is literally the definition of altruism means the sacrifice of the self to others, right? And collectivism is the subjugation of the individual to the group.
The collective.
Yes, yeah. It's not being kind and donating to charities. It is you have an obligation to sacrifice to serve others, and that's what makes you have a duty. That's what makes you a good person, is people who steal from themselves to give from other people. Now this is the concept of enlightened self-interest, which is you should give to charities because that's in your own best interest, because you have no idea what traumatic experience or terrible fate that befell somebody that has got them in this position, and to help one human out of that mud onto greatness. You have no idea what that person could create. And so there is a justification for charity that's based on self-interest. It does, but when you flip it to, you have to do it, and good people have to pay their taxes or whatever it is, that's collective.
That's a moral duty, right?
Yeah, and that's where that's altruism and collectivism. And so I guess what I was saying is I think, and this was the case for myself, because I used to fall into this camp of being an altruist and a collectivist, and self-righteousness is usually goes hand in hand with those two things. And being belligerent, or the term social justice warrior comes to mind. But once I got over that, I stopped feeling guilty for being alive, and I became really excited about life and learning skills, and I wasn't depressed and angry and pessimistic anymore. I actually wanted to learn these things. And so again, it's like a subtle difference. Like, are you running? Are you afraid of the collapse, or are you being pushed or pulled?
Excited for what's out there.
Yeah, and so it's a subtle difference, but I would actually argue that it'll be easier to have these philosophical kind of ethical conversations in your own head or with other people, and to understand, like, don't take my word for it, push back, challenge it, try to find a loophole where you can justify why you would be able to hurt somebody else. Because, well, if I don't hurt them before they'll hurt me. The terrorists, they're plotting against us, and that's what the government loves to do, is create these boogeymen. But it's a slippery slope, and what you'll see throughout history is the government is always using these. What is it? Was it Churchill who said, "Never let a crisis go to waste"?
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Someone, I don't know who it was, but I know the phrase.
Yeah, pretty insidious, right? It's like, especially one that you've created. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man.
Yeah. Well,
is it time to wind it up?
I think it's time to wind it up. That was a really good chat. And I guess in closing, where can people go to find out more about your zombie apocalypse / gardening tools? And do you have social media? You got a website? You've got YouTube?
We've got our website is reforgedironworks.com. And that's basically it for advertising. We stay off social media. It's a personal choice that we made.
Good man.
We do have a YouTube channel. You can just look for Reforged Ironworks if you want to look up on how-to videos. We got lots of those. And I just recommend going to the website. We're going to have a newsletter going out soon. Sign up for that so you can keep up to date with what we're doing. And otherwise, we post to the blog and just keep at her. Nice. Yeah.
Well, Tim, it's been an absolute pleasure. And I guess I should also say I have I think just about all of your tools, and they're all, it's functional art. And they'll be, who knows, maybe they'll be more valuable than cryptocurrency.
Man, I don't know I don't know anything about cryptocurrencies. You're gonna have
I'm just learning myself. So but it's another one of those technologies that has the potential to either free us or enslave us all. But the difference will be down to philosophy. It's not, that's it. It's just like whether or not people
make the choice,
realize that they have the right to be free, and that nobody else has the right to say otherwise. And if people get that, we're laughing. And I hope that we don't have to go back to, horse and buggy and pre-electricity. I kind of like I kind of like my life right now. It's pretty amazing. I wouldn't change much. But like I said, like we've talked about, there's lots of practical reasons, and spiritual and mental health and physical health reasons to engage in some of these things, and
Yeah, agreed.
Okay,
Yeah.
man. Any
Well, it was a pleasure chatting with you.
any parting wisdom? Any favorite quote? Any jokes? Other blacksmiths tell jokes?
Put me on the spot. No, the only thing I'll recommend to you and the listeners, to get a taste of Ayn Rand's influence on music, is to listen to Anthem and Closer to the Heart by Rush.
Okay.
Just have a listen to those lyrics and see what you think.
There you go. Spotify's getting two new likes.
Right on.
Okay.
Okay. You take care, Takota.
Take care, Tim.
Bye.